Welcome all. I'm so excited for our conversation today, which will explore what it looks like from the founder's view to build a company with purpose at the center. I'm really excited to specifically be joined by two MassChallenge alum, Karans Story, co-founder and COO of Ginger AI, now Headspace Health, and Shimon, co-founder and CEO of Tomorrow.io, formerly Climacell. Welcome, both of you.
Thank you.
Thanks for having us.
Awesome. Well, Shimon, if you don't mind, I'd love to start with you. Just tell us briefly about you, about the story of founding Tomorrow.io, and we'll start from there.
Sounds good. So I grew up in Israel, and like most Israelis, I had to go through a military service. In my service, I was a pilot for about 11 years. And during my service, I did all kind of managerial positions, and I was exposed firsthand to the challenges related to weather and climate. So weather was this one thing that kept me very worried and concerned on a day-to-day basis, more than being shot or my own malfunction. The daily struggle of weather, both in the cockpit level and operational level, was always there. And I knew how limited the technology of forecasting weather is, or was, and I also knew that there was any decision supporting tool to manage the challenges. But to be honest, I never thought I'm going to start a company around it. I moved to Boston. I did Harvard MBA. That's where we actually, engaged with MassChallenge in the Boston branch, and over there, what we did, the three founders, we tried to look at, the problem of weather and climate from a perspective of the entire industry or industries, even not just specifically aviation or pilots. And we learned that this is a huge problem, and it impacts every business in every country. And it's something meaningful enough for us to start a company around. And that's what led me to start a company.
Wow. And tell us just a little bit about sort of where are you today?
So the company has raised about $200 million until today. We're about 200 employees. And what Tomorrow is doing is helping countries and businesses manage their weather and climate-related challenges. It can be the US government. It can be enterprises such as Delta, United, JetBlue, Uber, the NFL, US Open Tennis, all the way to scooter companies and ride sharing and autonomous vehicles. Every company has a challenge. What Tomorrow is doing is we're providing them a software solution that helps them manage it in a way that is relevant to their business by giving them relevant recommendations for actions. And behind it, there is a pretty sophisticated technology of forecasting weather that includes launching our own satellites and running high-resolution models in the cloud. So it's a very complex business model with one goal in mind, helping customers manage their challenges.
It's fabulous. Thank you for that, and congrats on the extraordinary progress.
Thank you.
Karan, I'd love to turn to you. Tell us a little bit about your story and the founding of Ginger, all the way through where you are today, now Head Health.
Well, first off, thank you so much for having me. I really love the spirit and topic of this conversation, this conference. Our story and my story at Ginger, now Headspace Health, started over a decade ago. I was on the other end of a phone call after a loved one tried to take their own life. And so that really set me on this journey and got me into this space, mental health care. And the deeper I dug, the more I realized it was just so broken. For so many people, I've always thought of myself as a good read on people and a good judge of character. And I had no idea when this person tried to take their own life. Fortunately, they're still here, but the system hasn't changed a whole lot for them. So I went back to graduate school and at a business school at MIT and medical school at Harvard, really to study this intersection of data and healthcare, and where I connected with the MassChallenge team. And the more I realized, this was in many ways an everyone problem. About 1 billion people worldwide suffering from depression, anxiety, or a variety of mental health disorders. And That's only doubled during the COVID-19 pandemic. And so I think it's in many ways it's the defining challenge, or one of the defining challenges of our generation. And so, we started Ginger originally selling into clinics, hospitals, and eventually became a virtual clinic delivering on-demand access to mental health care 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, and typically under 2 minutes. And in the last year, we merged with the team from Headspace to create Headspace Health, which really is building an affordable, accessible, and comprehensive mental health platform. Everything from mindfulness and meditation content all the way to coaching, therapy, and access to medications through psychiatrists, primarily selling through employers and health plans, but also in a direct-to-consumer setting with over about 100 million members worldwide who have access to care, and now operating in about 190 countries worldwide.
Wow. I mean, congratulations also on your journey. This is, such a critical space to tackle, as you mentioned, now more than ever. For both of you, I'd love to just hear a little bit more about what it has meant to build a company which such important purpose at the center stone. I think, Shimon, as you mentioned, climate, but I know sustainability has also been sort of a really important end result or output of the work that you're doing. And Karan, as you say, mental health is probably one of the top challenges of our time. What has that meant for you to sort of build a company around those much larger societal challenges? Shimon, we'll jump back to you first, then go back. We'll continue the rally.
So I would divide it to two elements. The first, and I think the most important, is to start a business around a meaningful problem. Obviously, not all businesses are around meaningful problems, but at least for me, it was a prerequisite. Maybe it's because I'm coming from a military, something that has to do with like important mission, selfless mission, and I think there are so many venture-backed companies out there that are really, they're not moving the needle other than trying to make people rich, either the investors or the entrepreneurs and employees. And this is what I call like P2P, which is the biggest sector of the economy. It's privileged people solving privileged people's problems. But when you try to focus on bigger problems like climate adaptation, how do you help companies adapt to the new reality of climate change? You can really create a mission where talented people are excited to work together with you. So that's one element. The second element is, how do you create activities that are not oriented directly to the bottom line? I don't think that every business can start with sustainability or ESG or climate-related initiatives. You have to start by, otherwise you're just a nonprofit. And you have to start by thinking about how to build foundations for a real business. But at some point, I think most, if not all businesses, can really find ways to be more sustainable. And when I say sustainable, I mean thinking about contribution to the environment, to the society, to meaningful impact. And I want to give like a few examples. What we do for customers is primarily helping them with operational efficiency improvement. For example, how to save money by avoiding damages, how to optimize revenues by taking control of weather-related situations. But what we learned is that when companies try to optimize for that and try to optimize for sustainability, they actually accelerate both. For example, if an airline is trying to save money on the fluid that we're using for the icing operations, because the fluid is very expensive, you find out that this fluid is also very polluting. You can actually achieve both. If you look at a mining company that is trying to avoid fines every time they blast and the wind carries particles to the nearby community, they avoid the fines, they make money, but they're also becoming more sustainable and friendlier to the communities nearby. So you can actually achieve both things at the same time. and I think it contradicts the instinct that these two things are not working together.
Yes. Yeah, I think you mentioned several really important examples that highlight the where values and value are mutually reinforcing in economically valuable ways, which I think has been a surprising insight that really is just starting to come into practice, but is very much at sort of the heart of companies that are purpose built and are solving really important challenges in a commercial frame. Karan, I'd love for you to add how have you approached this? How has it shaped building Ginger and informing how you now lead at Headspace Health?
Well, first off, Shimon, I loved how you framed that. I feel like, these things don't have to be in conflict, even though that's the common narrative that most everyone kind of describes it. It's an either or. I think it can be an and, but you have to engineer this kind of in the core fabric of what you do. So in our case, our vision is a world where everyone can be kind to their mind. And there's a lot of value in that to specific entities, for instance, employers and health plans or other governments who are actually really interested in the mental health of their workforce, of their population. And the stronger or healthier that workforce is, the more effective or productive they can be, the more likely they're going to achieve those outcomes. And so where we thought about this is, how do we be intentional or kind of create strategic alignment from a mission, vision, values perspective? Recruit a set of leadership team, board members, investors who also believe in that same approach, and play for the long game, right? And the reality is a lot of these outcomes are not overnight successes. They require you being able to track and measure over a pretty long period of time, or they can be. And so I think that's a really critical factor here is really making sure that you actually sort of plant your view down the road, but then rewind back, well, to today, you're not a nonprofit, you're actually a corporation that's looking to deliver value to a variety of different stakeholders. And so you can stage that in the right way. But in our case, we think a lot about it in the context of growth unlocking access to care, that the more we grow, the more efficient we become, the more costs we pull out of the system, the more people will actually ultimately get access to care. And that we might start with a population that can afford to pay a premium, but over time, as the system and structures and technology and other kind of efforts get better, we can kind of move into populations that are more complex, that might not have the ability to pay at the same rates. But because we have the outcomes or other proof points, other entities might be willing to pay us for that. And so I think a lot of it really has to do with matching the complexity of maturity to the stage of growth. And so it's really a sequencing question, but that you can do both, that you really don't have to have profits ahead of purpose, that the two can actually be self-reinforcing.
Yeah. It's a really important sort of brilliant addition around the time horizon that's required to achieve this. In the short term, there may be more trade-offs or so-called trade-offs, but over the long horizon, it's quite possible. I know, Shimon, one of your advisors and our advisors, Bruce Simpson, talks often about just not losing the plot. And so if you're a founder that's launching something so important, you just don't lose sight of that. And bit by bit, you're building a company towards that really important impact over the long term. So this is great. I'd love to drill down maybe just a little bit deeper to give founders in the audience, we'll see you live tomorrow, just a little more sort of color and context. So if there are examples of decisions that you made that are, say, non-obvious, but have really contributed to creating long-term value for your shareholders and your stakeholders in surprising ways, perhaps you can just provide some color around that to bring this more to light. Karan, I'll start with you. I know, in particular, you've been very intentional about diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging. So I don't know if there's specific examples you want to highlight there, but I'll turn it over to you.
Certainly, I think first off, you may have a thesis around what works, but inevitably you're going to learn along the journey, and you're going to get a whole lot of data along the way. And I think one of the things that I've learned is that as an entrepreneur, you need to build your resilience muscle. You need to build your bounce back muscle. And for us, that's meant making a number of pivots over the course of our history, from originally kind of selling into providers and hospitals to actually becoming one, from really changing our leadership team as the company evolved over the years, and eventually kind of changing my own mindset as an entrepreneur, because I've been doing this now for well over a decade, and you need to, at each stage, sort of evolve your mindset. So I think that's been a really big part of my own growth as a leader, and our growth as a team, is being willing to learn and adapt and pivot along the way. Specifically as it relates to DEIB, I think, first off, I think it's really it is in everyone's responsibility. There isn't really just a DEIB leader who can engineer this into kind of the fabric of what you do. It's something that all of us need to be focused on, and it starts with really, I think, measuring and aligning on what matters. How does that manifest itself? And so for us, that's meant recruiting a diverse workforce that's actually representative of the populations we serve, because we serve a whole host of people from across the United States and now across the country and across the world. So making sure that we actually have our own who is made up of the people that we actually are serving. The second is actually then, again, kind of measuring the impact that they are having and reporting out on that on a regular cadence. So reporting out at a board level, reporting out on it at our company all hands. And in our case, it's actually measuring outcomes or symptom improvements, seeing that people actually get better by using the product, and using that to then guide decisions moving forward. And then the third bucket, I'd say, is really just being intentional about the populations that you care maybe most about. And for us, one cohort I think that we feel like is most in need right now are teens, adolescents who are struggling with mental health. The rates that I cited earlier were largely for adults, and the rates for adolescents and teens has just unfortunately gone the wrong direction over the last few years, especially during COVID-19. So we've looked for ways to be able to actually partner with other nonprofits and other groups that can unlock access to those populations. And so we offer, for instance, the Headspace product for free for teens so that they can have access to it. That's something we've been able to do now, given the stage and size and growth of the company. It's certainly not something that I think we would have been able to do right out of the gates, but we decided that was a really critical population for us that was important for our ability to deliver on impact. And so invested there to unlock that access.
That's great. Thank you. I think it's so important to highlight what you mentioned about reporting out on outcomes and impact alongside what I assume are your sort of typical operating metrics and financial metrics, including at the board level. Really powerful. And Shimon, I know you have been or have in place an explicit ESG strategy that's been sort of a growing part of tomorrow. Tell us a little bit about sort of both the what and the why, and perhaps sort of where you are in integrating that into how you manage your business.
Yeah, so first of all, we have our own internal ESG program where we try to measure our own emission and our own social responsibility and governance elements, just to make sure that, we're setting example. But I think the mission of tomorrow is really contributing to creating impact externally as well. For example, our technology is creating a direct, very big environmental impact. We're monitoring every place on Earth and helping climate scientists do better models. We're providing systems for companies to avoid weather-related damages that are only getting more frequent and volatile as a result of climate change, and I can go on and on. But I think, two examples of decisions we made that were not very intuitive that created value externally is one, 2.5 years ago, we started our own nonprofit. So the reason we did it was because we built a technology which is creating value for customers, but we're naturally focused on selling to customers that can pay, mostly North America and Europe and such. but our technology is actually creating real value, could create real value to people everywhere. Not many CEOs can say, if my company is successful, 100% of the human beings will benefit from it. We can say that. And we try to think about a vehicle through which we can provide access to the technology without sacrificing our own shareholders' value. You know, they didn't invest in us for us to go and donate the technology elsewhere. So through tomorrownow.org, which is the nonprofit that we created, we were able to provide this technology to farmers in Africa and such. And the nonprofit today is independent and is actually backed by Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. So that's one example. Another example is that when we looked, you know, we started as a SaaS only, software only business, and that's the solution we built at the beginning. But we were very, very focused on the problem. Okay, what are we trying to do? And when you are focused on the problem, you realize that, you know, some problems, the technique you chose at the beginning or the solution you chose is not always the best solution. And if you're just focused on the problem, you find out that maybe the best way for you to solve the problem is to go to space, even though you're a software company. And that is a non-trivial decision that is creating a lot of challenges. For example, it can backfire us in a time where funding is becoming very challenging, especially for impact-driven companies and for companies that now blend hardware or space into a software business model. But I do believe that in the long run, it will create a much bigger company and much more valuable with defensibility and moat. And at the same time, it will also create a bigger impact globally. What we're going to do is we're going to monitor every point on Earth with radars that will improve hurricane forecasting. It will provide flood alerts for every citizen in the world. And I can go on and on. So I think if you have this mindset of how do I optimize for impact and creating, you know, long-term value, you can make bold decisions that, you know, the average investor, the average CEO would look and say, no, I have a software business. Why would I do hardware now or decide to go to space? It's not a trivial decision to make, but when you're focused on a problem and you believe in it and you optimize for the long-term value, it's actually the easiest decision you can think of.
It's, I mean, first of all, we are cheering on the launch to space. Super, super exciting. And, you know, maybe one very small follow-up question is, you brought in the right capital partners, I assume, to give you this ability to follow the problem. Is that right? I know that was something, Karan, you mentioned as being sort of really important to being able to build a company with purpose at the center.
Yeah, I think that's exactly right. I think one of the biggest lessons I've learned over the years is just how important getting your who is, right? And who is not only your core executive team, but your mentors, your advisors, your board, and certainly your investors. So they all have the same core set of values. And they're, you know, Shimon, those are some fantastic examples, and they require a level of confidence, a level of fearlessness, you know, a level of willingness to bet on the long game. And that's not easy. And I know for many people, they may fall away from that. And especially in this space of just broader kind of social impact, the timelines are long, you know? And so I think that's such a critical part of mindful company building, is really choosing those, that orbit around you, because the team you build is the company you build. And I'd say one key strategy I've used over the years is to ask other entrepreneurs and other founders and other folks, who do you believe kind of operates in that same way, and really use that as a core vet to try to find people who are going to be in it when the times are tough, because that's usually when you find out very quickly kind of who's operating the same way.
Shimon, anything to add on that point?
No, just, you know, it's obvious, you know, the key partners are the investors, and you have to optimize not for valuation, not for, you know, just money. You have to optimize for partnership and people that, you know, actually back your vision and your values, and then any decision is easier.
That's great. So we've sort of moved naturally in this direction, which is great. But as we wrap up this awesome conversation, could we offer to the audience, founders in our live audience, one or two pieces of advice on, perhaps what they should be thinking about or look to get right very early on in order to be able to pursue the paths that you all have demonstrated are possible around building both with sort of profit and purpose in mind? What advice do you have for founders in our audience?
Want me to start with?
Go for it, Shimon.
So I think one main advice is focus on a problem, not on a solution. If you're focused on a problem, then you can adapt, you can pivot, you can do, everything is possible. Because the problem is not going anywhere. A solution can become easily obsolete. And if you're betting everything on a specific solution, you're a feature company. The second thing I would say related to entrepreneurship is just be consistent in your decisions, in how you make decisions, in processes, because that builds trust with everyone, with employees, with customers, with investors.
That's great advice.
Love both those. Yeah, I just add that entrepreneurship is hard, and it's really hard when you're building for impact. Doesn't mean it's not worth it. It's just really hard. And one of the things I underappreciated, which feels sometimes tough to say as a company that's focused on mental health, is take care of your mental health. Take care of your team's mental health. You're going to get so many no's along the way. You're going to find so many people who say this shouldn't exist, this doesn't work. You're going to have you're going to make so many mistakes that building resilience and creating the right mindset and investing in your own mental health, whatever that might look like, whether it's mindfulness practice, whether it's coaching, whether it's support groups or other strategies to really create space away from your company so that you can do best when you're working on your company. That's incredibly important because these are all marathons. None of these are sprints. And if you're going to really have the kind of global social impact you're looking for, you need to really make sure you take that lens and you support yourself along the way.
Great. Thank you both so much. We could have had this conversation for another hour for sure, but I really appreciate the time today to hear about each of you, your journeys, your company's journeys, and the wisdom you have for our audience. So thank you both.
Thank you.
Thank you, everybody.